Once upon a time,
in a land far away.
I'm Katrina.
And I'm Jeff.
This is the Fairy Tellers Podcast.
Myth, legend, folklore, fable.
We explore what they say about cultures then and now,
Grab a hot cup of cocoa and a comfy seat
while we tell you a tale.
Welcome back to the podcast for another episode. An exciting episode.
Oh, Jeff. This is going to be a fun episode. A groundbreaking episode. No.
But before we get into it, because I am excited to get into it, just a few things to pass on to you at home, dear listener. If you've been paying attention to the last few episodes, we've teased it. But if you haven't been, then hear now for the first time that we were guests on Not My Fantasy Podcast. And we were there with the hosts of Not My Fantasy Podcast, as well as the two hosts from Fairy Tale Fix Podcast. So the six of us all together had a wonderful, hilarious, delightful time talking about the latest Disney Snow White movie.
And it was funny because the last two episodes, we hadn't recorded it yet. And so we were anticipating that it was going to be amazing and that you should definitely go and listen to it. And so we were already kind of being like, oh yeah, no, it will be amazing. But now we can guarantee, because we've actually recorded it now and it's out. It is super fun, very funny, excellent thoughts by all people. One of the followers of the podcast who went and watched it really enjoyed that our banter about the movie was longer than the movie itself.
Yeah,
which
I was going to mention that too.
I deeply appreciate.
So if you like reviews of movies that are longer than the movie itself and or are interested in seeing our faces, because we do not have a video podcast, they have a video version of the podcast on YouTube that you can check out, or you can hear it through your ears as normal podcasts by finding it wherever podcasts are found.
Yeah. And I'll tell you guys, now that I have rewatched it and I know that it was way worse in my head than it was in real life, I feel comfortable telling everybody that about minute 7, a little booger fell out of my nose, a little dry booger bit fell out of my nose and onto my lip. And I was consciously aware of the fact that we were on video, it was being recorded. And so I was oh, I had rubbed my nose because it kind of itched. It itched because a little hard booger had come loose. And so I had rubbed my nose and then it fell out. And at first I was oh my gosh, I hope nobody saw that a little booger just fell out of my nose. And then I realized that the booger was on my lip. And I was stuck in my lip gloss. And I was oh my gosh. And so I'm trying to pick it off of my lip. And I was oh my gosh. So the whole time as we were waiting for the episode to come out, I was oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I wonder if she will edit around, if there's any possible way that she's going to be able to edit around my booger falling out of my nose. No, it was so small and minuscule. She, when she was editing it, probably didn't even realize or clock that a booger had fallen out, or that anything was happening to me at all. In my head, it was such a big moment this, oh my gosh, this is going to be on the internet for everyone to see. And then it was nothing.
Yeah. So if you want to try to catch that, all you internet sleuths out there, go to minute 7 and enhance. Let's see if you can catch Boogergate.
So yeah, go check out that.
It was a lot of fun. I love being guests on both of those podcasts.
Yes.
Number one, because they're just such fun and lovely people. And it was super fun to hang out with them. And being on one place altogether was also super great. Just as great as I would have imagined.
Yep. So yeah, definitely make sure to go and check out that episode of Not My Fantasy Podcast and more of their episodes and Fairy Tale Fix. Also a delight. Also lots of podcast episodes. They're taking a hiatus right now for, I don't know how long, but they have a back catalog that you definitely can dive into. And yeah, they're awesome. So go check that out. But this episode that Jeff is sure is going to be an exciting and interesting episode.
Mm-hmm.
And it will be. But this episode is in celebration of Shakespeare Day, which is celebrated April 23rd because it is believed to be Shakespeare's birthday and his death date.
Wow.
That is, I'm like, geez, that's pretty crazy.
I have always wanted, I've always wanted to like die on my birthday. Not like every year, but
Nope.
you know what I mean? Like when I do die, when I do die, I like want it to be on my birthday. Like I just love that, like, you know, that symmetry.
Me too. Is what I was gonna say before you were like, not every year.
Some years more than others do I want to die on my birthday.
But no, I really like that idea too of like dying on my birthday, because it just feels like it feels like closing a book.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we did it. We're done. We've completed it. It feels less like, leaving loose ends.
Yeah.
Even though
like
obviously
keeping it tidy.
Yeah, nice and tidy. Even though, again, no. I want to live as long as possible.
Like people don't have to like guess when they're like, oh, how old was he when he died? Like the math becomes simpler because you're like, well, okay, he died in April, but his birthday wasn't until later in the year. So he wasn't,
Yeah.
80, he wasn't 174 yet. He was only 173. He was going to turn 174, but died before he could. That's, I jumped from like an actual average like age to die. I was like, no, I had such faith in medical science and the progress that they'll make in the next 40 years that I'm like, they're going to add 100 years onto the average lifespan.
Yes.
Anyway,
but Shakespeare did it.
He did it.
It is believed.
Just like he was like coining all these words, he was ahead of the time and birth and death on the same year.
Yeah.
You know what probably makes it easy?
I like that you just said on the same year instead of like the same day. Yeah.
On the same day. But also, you know what takes a little bit of the wind out of that is that like they think.
Yeah.
It's like the whole like they think that he was born on this day and they think that he might have died on this day. It's like, you know what? If we're just thinking, we can fudge it a little bit to make sure that those dates are the same.
And I would like it if people did the same for me, actually.
Yeah,
like if I don't, oh man, because it's like with Betty White, where she died, I think it was like a month and a half or something. Even it might have been 20 days, something like that. Right before she turned 100. Fudge the math. I hope that
she was 100.
I hope that in like 100 years from now, people are like, Betty White, who is believed to have died on her 100th birthday.
Yes. On your 100th birthday? That's amazing.
Even better. Yeah. That's like, oh, perfect. She did.
I actually wanted to die on like my 113th birthday so that I would be able to have lived in 3 separate centuries.
Oh, that's very cool. The reason why we think we know what Shakespeare's birthday is because his christening day was written down in like the church, his family's like church records. And he was christened on April 26th, which the custom was to do it when the baby was 3 days old. And so they do that math where they're like, okay, April 26th minus 3 days. He was probably born April 23rd. So it's like, probably. But either way, Shakespeare Day celebrated April 23rd for those who observe. And we thought it would be fun to do another revisit of the folklore that Shakespeare used inside his plays. And so we gave our patrons over on our Patreon account the choice of which play we would cover, and they picked All's Well That Ends Well. I didn't give only comedy options. One of these days, we are going to cover King Lear against everyone's wishes, but not today. Today, we will do a lot of laughing and pondering on the genius of Shakespeare. Because every time we do episodes like this, and I'm like getting ready for it, I always find myself going, oh my gosh, I think Shakespeare was like a genius.
You're like just coming around.
Yeah, I keep being like, oh, you know what? Now that I think about it, he was a real artist. And I'm the first person to ever think that. And I believe I say the exact same thing on our Taming of the Shrew episode, where I'm like,
I forgot we've done Shakespeare before.
Yeah. And it's so funny because like in the description of the podcast episode, but it was back when Jeff was doing the descriptions of our episodes. And he wrote as like a note, like Katrina was like recording in a different location than usual. And so it sounds a little echoey. Next time I'll remind her not to record in the bathroom or like record on the toilet. which are like so funny. The reason why it sounded different was because we were trying to record that episode while I was on vacation at my parents' house. And so I was in this room in my parents' house that just has a lot of really hard furniture. And it's kind of like a cavernous room.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just did sound super echoey when I was like recording it there. But yeah, that was our 53rd episode, all the way back in 2021.
Wow.
So this is a really interesting play. I'm glad people picked it because I did not know this play. People might not know this about me. I don't know every Shakespeare play. I am a nerd, but I'm not a Shakespeare scholar.
Nerd.
So I had not read this one, and our patrons picking this one kind of forced me then to read it, become very familiar with it. And so I'm really happy that they picked it, especially because so the last one that we did of like Taming of the Shrew, not my favorite tale type as it would turn out, because it feels like it was more recent that we retold it, because I feel like I've been joking about it ever since, of like being like, oh yeah, sometimes after I retell a tale, I very much want to just say, and then this man blew up and died. So yeah, it rubbed me the wrong way. This story, All's Well That Ends Well, I'm excited about because instead of me fully hating on a man, Shakespeare kind of leads his audience to hate on this man for me. It is very interesting. So like I said before, we're not going to focus a whole lot on the Shakespeare play itself, because we're going to mostly focus on the folklore inside of the tale. But I am going to retell the play so that people all know, because I assume that not everybody has read like all plays. My main source of information about Shakespeare and the folktales that he uses comes from the book Shakespeare and the Folktale, an anthology of stories edited by Charlotte Artese. And this book was recommended to me years and years ago by a friend of ours. She is a Shakespeare scholar. She has a master's degree in Shakespeare, teaches English at a university. I can't remember what one, but yeah, she went to England to get her master's degree in Shakespeare. And she told me about this book years ago because she was like, oh, you like folk tales? I just read about this really interesting book you might like and enjoy. And absolutely I do. And it was funny because I reached out to her this week and was like, oh, just thank you again for telling me about this book. It's really amazing. It's incredible. And yeah, I'm so glad you know like so much about Shakespeare. And she was like, oh, Katrina, I think you think I know more about Shakespeare than I do. I'm probably only really proficient in, of his 36 plays, I'm probably only proficient in about 20 of them. And she said that like that was like a small number or something. And I was like, girl, like, what are you talking about? As if like the majority of people in the world have read more than one. Like,
yeah, maybe two. Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet.
Yeah.
Like,
and props if your teacher did something wild when you were in high school and had you read Othello.
Yeah. But, then we've all seen She's the Man and 10 Things I Hate About You. So we feel like we've seen or read a couple more. But, as my quiz result will show, does not prepare you for speaking knowledgeably about either of those plays.
Yeah. And so I'm going to be retelling a little bit like quickly of All's Well That Ends Well. Because I assume that, like, oh, right, the reason I was telling that story was because one of the ones that she doesn't feel proficient in is All's Well That Ends Well.
So we had to make sure that we were going to do one that she wouldn't be able to come and be like, actually, and correct everything that we said wrong about it.
Oh, it's just interesting because I'm like, okay, when like a person who has like a master's degree in Shakespeare is like, you know what? I don't really know that one that well. I'm like, girl, guess what? I'm going to assume most of my audience also probably is not proficient in this one. I wasn't either. This was like the first time that I read it and encountered it. And because of what I know about folklore, it made me realize again the genius of Shakespeare. And which is hilarious because again, like it's not a surprise that like, yeah, he he was a genius of his time. But what's so amazing that I love about doing this, looking at the folklore inside of Shakespeare's tales, is that it reminds me that the audience that he was writing for and communicating with was not us. And because the way that most of us encounter Shakespeare is usually in like a high school class against our will, and it's like one play, and we don't purposely go out of our way to like consume more Shakespeare. I think it's easy to forget that we are looking at his plays from a completely different lens because when he was writing them to an audience that knew all of kind of the local folklore, fairy tales, and he was writing about or to an audience for that particular time and place. And so he's writing basically to the knowledge that people held going backwards from that time. He wasn't thinking, he didn't know anything about the time moving forward away from his death, obviously, because like, how could he have known about high speed internet? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But when we, from our vantage point on that timeline, are looking back, sometimes it becomes harder to see what he was trying to communicate with his audience. And I think this one is really brilliant because, and all of that lead up is for me to say, the play All's Well That Ends Well is one of Shakespeare's problem plays. That's what scholars call it, one of his problem plays. It is called a problem play because it's not really placeable in like a comedy or tragedy sense. So when people talk about comedies, even like the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri. When they're talking about comedy, they're talking about you come from like a place of like darkness, despair, all's not well. And then by the time you get to the end, you have ascended into light. There's a progression upwards into a positive. So it's not comedy ha-ha as much as it's like, oh, by the time this is all over, we're in this kind of like happy place. Tragedy is the opposite of that. And so when people talk about like when they're looking at Shakespeare, comedy, tragedy, they're like, oh, at the end of comedies, everyone's married. Or, oh, all the happy couplings have happened. The people who are meant to be coupled are coupled. And so it's fine. And then his tragedies, it's like everyone dies, which I feel like, yeah, in high school, you're more familiar with his tragedies because you are reading things like Hamlet. Everybody dies. Tragedy. Romeo and Juliet, this couple that are supposed to be together. No, they got married in secret and then died. Othello. Oh no, he got jealous, tricked into smothering his wife in anger. She's now dead. He tragically now must die too. He's dead. Oh, this is like a horrible thing that is like taking place. And so we're more used to, I think, the tragedies. And this play, All's Well That Ends Well, it ends with the couple together. But when the couple ends up together, you go, you as like an audience feel very uncomfortable about them being together. And Shakespeare does this in a really fascinating way by taking a known folk tale and pairing it with another really interesting character dynamic that's happening like within the play to really point out what he's trying to show about the character of the people, like their values, how they are in the world, so that it complicates it enough so that by the time you get to the end of the folk tale part of it, you are going, ew, that's not great. And then it ends with, well, I guess all's well that ends well. And the audience is left with wondering, is it?
Is it though?
Is all well if it ends well? Is this ending well? And so it's very complicated, but also I feel like it really showcases the complexity with which Shakespeare was looking at the world and reworking some of these stories and commentating on the human condition, on how people treat each other, interact with each other. And it's super, super fascinating because the folk tale that Shakespeare is working with in All's Well That Ends Well is ATU 891 The Man Who Deserts His Wife. And there are a lot of early versions of this story, one of the earliest of which is an Indian collection of tales, which is called The Ocean of the Stream of Stories. And so we have that going back to like the 11th century, but also before Shakespeare, and pretty much the folktale part of this, it is literally like almost like word for word, not word for word, but I guess like plot point by plot point, a tale from the Decameron, which we have not talked about Boccaccio's Decameron maybe at all in the time that we've been doing the podcast. So basically, very quickly, oh, and this is interesting because I mentioned the Divine Comedy. The person who named it, or who I think coined the term, the Divine Comedy, was Boccaccio, who wrote the Decameron, because he basically said something along the lines of, like, Alighieri wrote a divine comedy, I wrote a human comedy. And it basically takes place in the 13th century, where he was like writing from. The point of it is a lot like the Pentamerone, in that it's like a frame, there's like a frame narrative. And the frame narrative is basically that there is the Black Plague has taken over the city, and so people are hiding out outside of the town who don't have the Black Plague, and they're trying to avoid it by basically staying away from anybody else who has the Black Plague. And to entertain themselves inside, there are, I think it is like 7 women, 3 men that are taking turns telling a tale every day. And I think it's 10 tales for 10 days. So it's like 100 tales. Something like that. But anyway, so it's a large collection of tales. And on the 3rd day, the 9th story that is retold, it is this tale type of the man who deserted his wife. And it is this Shakespeare play, or Shakespeare used that version for this so much that it's not a thing where scholars are like, I wonder if he used this as inspiration for, no. He used some of the same exact names for his characters, like Bertram. It's Bertram in the 13th century Decameron book that's named Bertram. All of the cities in France that things are taking place, the king having an ulcer, all the scholars aren't debating whether or not he, like, did Shakespeare know about this? Yeah, no, he definitely knew about it. The only thing that it's missing is this other character and his kind of story arc through All's Well That Ends Well. And his name is going to be impossible. I'm going to try to keep saying his name the same throughout. I think it's Pericles.
It's apparently French origin.
Perrols, because they wouldn't pronounce the S at the end. Perrol.
Well, I don't.
All right.
I think
we'll do our best.
Paroles.
So I feel like a lot of the time Shakespeare, not a lot of the time, I don't know, in the plays that I've read, he usually sets up a lot of like foils where you have like one character is the opposite of like another character, or they have just opposite values or traits or whatever. And I feel like Bertram's best friend, Perrault, he is the addition. His whole story throughout All's Well That Ends Well is basically the addition to the folktale that highlights what Shakespeare was trying to get at in his play when he was writing it. So he like added this character and this whole character's backstory, not to act as a foil to Bertram, but to basically point out that Bertram is the same. To basically point out, oh, look at these 2 men who are absolute turds, which I want to believe that Shakespeare was trying to show what turds these guys are. Not that he makes our heroine much better, because he kind of points out her character flaws as well. But anyway, so because the play itself is not the main point of the story, I'm going to try to recap the play All's Well That Ends Well as quickly as possible. Or not as quickly as possible, but without getting too like into the weeds of the play itself. So we start off with this guy, Bertram. And he is about ready to leave to go and be with the King of France because his father has recently passed away. And the king is ill. And so he's like calling all of like the court to him. And so since Bertram's father has recently died and he's now the count of Rassillion, the city. Again, it's funny because Rassillion, like the city, it's also in the Decameron folktale. It's so funny to me that it's like the exact same French city is like, it was clearly just, yeah, it was used as a vehicle for Shakespeare's message. But anyway, Bertram's mother, the former countess, she's really upset, sad because her son is leaving, but she's kind of like taking comfort in the fact that she has this young woman who is staying with her and is in her care because this young woman's father has also recently died. He was a famous physician. And so he was a working class man, lower in class than obviously the count and the countess. But when he died, the countess, seeing this girl's intelligence and her good virtues, was happy to have her stay with their family and be like one of their wards, like with them. Anyway, so the countess or the former countess, she's upset because her son is going away and she's just recently lost her husband. So she's really upset about that. And this girl, Helen, the doctor's daughter, Helen, she's really upset too. And everybody thinks, oh, she's upset because her dad recently died and she's just like still grieving that. And then she's basically, I'm not still grieving that. That's not what I'm grieving. I'm grieving because Bertram is leaving. And I love Bertram, like with all my heart. I love Bertram. And one of the last things that Bertram's mother says to him before he leaves is that she hopes that because he has inherited his father's good looks, that he's also inherited his father's good virtues, which we're about to see he has not. Like the start of the play is this like, and like the first scene is this setting up of like, oh, here's what's going on. Like this person loves this guy. He isn't even paying attention to her at all because she's not of his same like social class, whatever. And the mom is like, wow, I really hope that you prove to be as beautiful a soul as like you are beautiful of face, like just like your father. And then this kid's like, and no, I'm not going to do that. So they write off, whatever. And in the royal court, the king, he's ill, but he's been hearing about these different fights that are going on between these different like Italian cities. And he has basically told them he's not going to interfere with that. He's not going to get involved with that. But if any of his French soldiers or whatever want to join in, sign up to go and fight some of those fights, he's totally fine with it, but he's not going to enter in. He's not going to pick a side in any of that. And Bertram is like, oh yeah, well now might be our time to like prove what manly men we are by like fighting in this war. And the king was like, no, not you. I don't want you to go. I want you to work here with me. Wait till you're maybe a little bit older to like join these fights. And so Bertram's feeling upset. He like wants to like join in the fight and whatever. And his friend Perrault also wants to be like a guy who like goes out and fight and prove his like manliness. Anyway, but within all of this like context talking, you hear more about the king is ill. He's starting to die. Well, he asked Bertram, hey, didn't your father used to have this really famous physician? Whatever happened to him? And Bertram's like, oh, sorry, that famous physician is dead. And the guy's like, oh, I really wish that he was still around because I believe that I could have been cured of this. It's unclear. Like when they say fistula, I don't know exactly what they're talking about. If it's like a stomach ulcer where he has like a hole in his stomach, something. But he's like really, really ill. The doctors haven't been able to fix it. Meanwhile, Helen is back with the countess and she's like feeling really bummed out that she really likes this guy, but she doesn't think it's going to happen. She kind of gets tricked into telling the countess that she loves Bertram, the countess's son. And the countess is like, oh my gosh, I would love it if he married you. That would be amazing because you're such a wonderful person. And she's like, yeah, but it's never going to happen because like I'm so lowborn. And the countess is like, I wouldn't care about that. I don't think that my son should care either. And she kind of like floats this idea that she's been having of going to the court and one, seeing this guy Bertram, but then also seeing if she can cure the king because she was taught some medicine by her dad. And I think I forgot to mention that at one point there was like a scene between Helen and this like jerk Paroles, where Paroles is basically talking about, it's this whole long thing about virginity, which is important, like in the story, because she's like, oh, nothing's more important than like a woman's virginity. And then he's like, yeah, nobody actually wants virginity. That's like a stupid thing to have. Or like the longer you have it, the worse it is.
Mm.
And so it's so interesting because it's like Shakespeare having them have this like whole dialogue about like the power struggle between men and women and the value systems that are placed on them, where it's like you have to one side, oh no, you need to be a virgin, like when you get married, super important. But at the same time, the longer that you're a virgin, like the lamer it is, the less men kind of like want you.
Uh-huh.
So women are stuck in this really hard place of you don't want to be too intelligent. You don't want to be too prudish. You don't want to be too like anything, or else you're annoying to men. And that is like, oh, that kind of like sets everything up.
Mm-hmm.
So the king's, I can't tell whether he's like a court jester or his name is LeFou, which means like the fool in like French. We learned that from Disney's Beauty and the Beast. But anyway, so he comes to the king and tells him, hey, there's a she doctor here that is like just arrived for you and thinks that she has like medicine. And the king is like, a woman? Why would I want a woman doctor like helping me? That's like insane. But bring her anyway. So Helen comes in and the king is like, okay, lady, what is it? And she's like, hey, my dad used to be this really famous doctor, used to work for the count before he died, but he taught me a lot of different medicine. And I have all the things I need to cure what's wrong with you. And the king is like, I don't think anyone can cure what's wrong with me. It's been really upsetting dealing with all this like health issues. I don't think that you have what it takes to heal me. And Helen was like, okay, so here's the deal that I'll make with you. If you let me try and you're not better within, I think it was like 8 days. I can't remember if in the play he gave her 8 days or if that was in the Decameron, but either way, she gave like a time period of like, if I can't cure you, you can have me killed. But if I do cure you, I would like something from you in return. And he was like, oh, yeah, if you could cure me, I'd give you like anything at all that you want. And she's like, let me have my pick of husband, no matter what our status difference. And the king was like, yeah, sure, no problem. Like, I could definitely find you someone to marry, no problem. Anyway, so surprise, surprise. She gives him like medicine. He's miraculously healed. And, it's incredible. And it's funny because there's like this like one little scene in between when she gives him the medicine and him being cured. And like the whole point of the scene is to just buy time so that he can be like miraculously, so that time passes on the stage so that he's like miraculously healed. So, and it's just a bunch of jokes between the countess and like, I think the character's called the clown. So whatever. So the king's court, he's like, I'm healed. It's amazing. It's like magnificent. He comes out and is like, I'm all better now. And everyone's like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I can't believe that this has happened. This is like wonderful, wonderful news. And so he was like, I want everybody to meet the person who cured me, Helen. He calls all of these men like into the room so that he can like heap praises on her for all she's able to do and like help him. He's like, I will line up all my noblemen and let Helen make her choice. And so she kind of keeps going up to each of the noblemen and is telling her like, if I were to ask, would you say yes? And they were like, yes, of course I would. And she's like, that's so nice, but no. And until she finally gets to Bertram, and then she says like, this is the man, this is the one that I want to marry. And so you have this like whole line of men who are saying that they would willingly marry her, willingly want to marry her because the king loves her. They don't care about her status. They would willingly marry her. But then she gets to Bertram and she's like, this is the guy that I want. And Bertram immediately is like, no, this is my dad's physician's daughter. Like this, she's like classes below me. I don't want her. And he like basically like pitches a fit in front of like the king and like all these noblemen of like, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. Like, this is so stupid and this is gross and like whatever. And Helen basically is like, oh, okay, I'm sorry. You're right. I can see why he wouldn't want me. That this was like a stupid idea. I'm sorry. And like goes to leave. And the king by this time is like super pissed with Bertram and is like, how dare you? If you're upset because you think she's lowborn, she's not bringing anything to the deal, whatever, me as the king, I'll pay for her dowry. Why are you being such like a stupid jerk? And he's like, I don't love her. She's lowborn. I don't like her. Whatever. I don't want to do this. And the king is like, okay, you need to shut up. Because, like, you're going to marry this woman or you're basically like, you're dead to me. You're going to throw away like your whole life. And so finally, Bertram is like, fine, I will marry you. And the king was like, cool, we'll do it tonight. It'll be great. So Bertram's really upset. He's like, oh my gosh, like this is so stupid. I don't know what to do. And Parolles, his friend, like comes to him and is like, yeah, you can marry her, but like you don't have to sleep with her. You don't have to be with her. You wanted to go off to war anyway. How about you marry her, but basically you tell the king that like, okay, I'll marry her, but you need to let me go off to war to do the fighting that I wanted to do. And Bertram is like, oh, that'd be great. That way I don't have to be near this woman. So he basically like writes her a letter. And so it's like really quick, they get married. He hands her a letter and he says, oh yeah, give this to my mom. When you see her, I'm going to right away. Like the king wants me to go and do this battle somewhere else, which he didn't. He just lied. He gives Helen this letter and then he sends another messenger faster to his mom with like another letter. And so the letter to his mom basically says like, hey, I got married really fast to Helen. How embarrassing, like horrifying for me, but I'm going off to war. Like, I'll see you around. And his mom reads this letter and she was like, oh my gosh, is my son a piece of crap? Is my son like a full turd? Yep. The answer is yep. He is a full turd. So when Helen gets back, by this point, she's read the letter that she's carrying back and she's distraught. So she gets home and the countess is like, oh, you're my daughter. I just read that you guys got married and that, like, you're my daughter-in-law. And Helen's like, it doesn't matter because he said, I'm not going to be his wife unless I am able to get this ring off of his finger. Oh, and I forgot to mention something because it's not super pointed out well early in the play, but the king, after Helen cures him, the king gives Helen a ring. They don't really, I don't know, maybe I need to reread it. I don't know. I didn't feel like they fully explained it until like the end. But when she was cured, the king gave Helen this ring and said, this is my ring from the family of the king. If you ever need my help, send this ring and I will come to you. Like, I will come to your aid. So Helen's got her ring from the king. We need to remember where all the rings are at any given point in this like play. Because Bertram in his letter said, you have to get my family ring off of my finger and you need to be pregnant with my child for me to call you my real wife. And I'm not going to come home to Resilion until I don't have a wife anymore. And so he was basically like, I'm going to stay out to battle. So Helen, obviously, she's distraught, really, really upset, doesn't really know what to do. So sad for her at this whole situation. And the Countess is also super sad because she's finding out like, oh, wow, my son is a horrible guy. So in Florence, which is now where Bertram has gone to fight the war, the Duke out in Florence put Bertram in charge of the cavalry, and Bertram is fighting really valiantly. He's doing an amazing job. And in this, I think he like famously says something along the lines of like, he is a lover of war and a hater of love. Which
he's a fighter, not a lover.
Yeah, I'm a fighter, not a lover. And then honestly, like the whole time he's like, I want people to know how big and tough I am. I'm big and tough. I'm big and tough. And like, he doesn't worry about like honoring commitment to family. He just wants the glory of winning wars and like fighting battles. That's like what he wants like in this life. So then the Countess discovers that Helen has written her a letter, and Helen's written her a letter saying that she's going to become a pilgrim to head to the shrine of Saint Jacques, which is interesting to note because so she writes that she's going out as a pilgrim to this like one site, which is not Florence, but she ends up in Florence. So we kind of like insinuate by that, or we can kind of look into that as like she lied to her mother-in-law to say that she was going on this like pilgrim to the shrine of Saint Jacques so that she could actually be trying to find where Bertram's like fighting war. So she's lied about this because she wants her mother-in-law to send word to Bertram to say, oh, your wife has gone away. She's not at home anymore. So now it's safe for you to come home. Because she's kind of hoping that maybe if she leaves, he'll come back. One, because she feels guilty. She feels like the longer he's out fighting, the more likely it is that he will get killed in a battle, which that makes sense. But also she just really wants him to come home because she wants to be with him. But anyway, but she's going out to Florence to see if she can find him and like his battalion. So now we're all in Florence, and there is a widow and her daughter, Diana. And it's really interesting that her daughter's name is Diana because Diana is the Roman name of Artemis, who is a virgin goddess. And virginity is a really important like component in like all of this virginity, virtue, all that stuff. So this widow and Diana and this other woman are kind of talking about like, oh man, Bertram, this guy who like came in from like the King of Paris, like the King of Paris's armies. He's been fighting amazing. He's been doing great. It's like incredible. And the widow was like talking to Parolles, this like jerk butt, about how Bertram really wants to hook up with her daughter, Diana. And this other woman is warning Diana to be careful with Bertram because sometimes soldiers just come into these towns, fall in love with a local girl, no intention of like actually marrying them or making an honorable, like whatever. They just want to hook up. And so that's kind of seems like what Bertram is doing is he's like, oh, I really like this girl, Diana. Oh, I really like you. I really like you. Maybe we could be something more. Even though, again, he's already proven to us, the audience, that he doesn't want to marry some lowborn woman. So we are led to believe he's just out on the battlefield, hanging out with a bunch of dudes. He's horny. He saw Diana, thought she was hot, just wants to probably, hook up. And Diana's like not that interested. So while they're all having this conversation about this, in walks Helena. I'm assuming after the guy Parolles like leaves. So Helen shows up at this inn and tells the widow that, oh, I'm a pilgrim. I'm just passing through for the night. Do you mind if I stay here? And the widow's like, that's totally fine if you stay here. Tell me a little bit about yourself. And she's like, oh, I'm coming from France. I think there's some soldiers here that have come from France. And the widow is like, oh my gosh, there are some soldiers here. And there's this one who's trying to hook up with my daughter, Diana. And he has such a sad story that we just heard about, that he was forced to marry this woman against his will in the king's court. And he's horribly miserable because he was forced to marry this awful woman against his liking. And it's funny because Parolles, I guess at some point had said that, oh yeah, the wife, she's too mean, too lowly to even repeat her name because you wouldn't know what her name is because she's such a lowborn loser. And Helen is like, oh yeah, I've heard the same thing about this lady, which is her. But then she finds out that Diana is not that interested in that guy. And she's constantly trying to guard against him coming to her. And they also have this conversation about, oh, well, maybe Bertram would be okay of a guy if his friend Parolles wasn't around, because he kind of seems to be a huge gross jerk. Anyway, so meanwhile, back at the soldiers camp in Florence, some French noblemen have come up to Bertram and told him that Parolles is not to be trusted, not a great guy. He's a coward. He's a liar. Mm-hmm. He's a promise breaker. He isn't great. And one of the reasons why they think that is because they had heard him talking back at the king's place Parolles was encouraging Bertram to leave his wife, to go into battle, to not do what he was supposed to do. And so they all are kind of like, hey, I think this guy's like a snake. So they're all trying to convince him that Parolles is like this gross jerk. And so they were saying, what we need to do is we need to ambush him, like sneak up, pretend to kidnap him, and pretend that we're part of like the enemy's camp, and you'll see what a coward and a loser he is. And finally, Bertram's like, okay, I'll let you guys play this like trick on this guy, just like so that we can see if he really is like a coward and a loser and a jerk. But Bertram is like, I feel confident in his like fine personality and his great personality traits. Okay, so he's given permission for them to like kidnap and torture his friend, basically. Great. Which is important later. And again, not showing that the two men are foils of each other, but that they're like the same as each other.
Right.
So back at the widow's house, Helen was like, oh, okay. So you remember how we were talking about Bertram and his wife? That's actually me. Now that we're alone in your house, like, let me tell you, like, it's actually me. So she was able to kind of like convince her, the widow and Diana, that she was like the wife. And so she's like, here's what I think you need to do, Diana. You need to agree to finally hook up with Bertram. And Diana's like, oh my gosh, I'm not like some skank. I wouldn't do that. And the widow's like, oh no, you wouldn't do this to like this like poor woman. Would you have her like tarnish her like reputation? And Helen's like, no. Let me tell you like the full plan first before you like freak out. So what you need to do is you need to tell Bertram, hey, I'd totally be willing to hook up with you, but I need a few things from you first. And those things are that she needs him to, ahead of time, give Diana his ring.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, give Diana his ring off of his finger and then promise to hook up with her with like the lights completely out. He has to sleep with her like in the complete darkness. And it's so that they're going to do an old switcheroo, which guys, just like as a side note, we are on the Fairy Tellers podcast very against sexy time switcheroos.
Yes.
That's not informed consent. Don't do sneaky time switcheroos. Even if it is to trick your spouse into hooking up with you. But that is what happened. So they agree to this plan. And so Bertram sneaks away from the guys at night while they're doing their like kidnapping, goes into town. He gives Diana his ring. When they have that conversation, like with each other, he gives Diana that ring. So now she has his ring and Helen still has the ring from the king. So they then do the sneaky time switcheroo and he accidentally hooks up with his wife and she gives him the king's ring. So now he has the king's ring. Diana has his ring. That's where all the rings are currently. Anyway, so meanwhile, back at the camp, the men have kidnapped their own soldier, Parolles, and immediately upon questioning, so they wait for Bertram to get back. Bertram gets back and stays quiet. They pretend like they're all speaking a different language so that they can really, confuse him into thinking that he's been stolen by the enemies or whatever. And then one of them pretends to be a translator and is like, oh, they want to know all of this information. Oh, yeah. I think they're pretending to speak like Russian. They're like Russian mercenary soldiers that are fighting against these like Italian or French mercenary soldier in Italy. Anyway, complicated. So they start, being like, oh, where's your base camp? How many people are there? And this guy, he like immediately just gives all of them up. He's like blindfolded and just telling them every single useful information thing about it as they humanly can, like including like dissing some of the guys that, that are like right there. So then I'm like, seriously, it's so sad. He like takes off his blindfold, or they take the blindfold off of him. And all of those guys are standing there being like, wow, you're an absolute weenie. And he basically is like, well, at least I didn't die. So like, that's all that matters, is because he is only looking out for number one. And like, that's his like bottom line. And at least he's true to himself in that way. And that like, he's a sneaky snake.
The one good thing we can say about him is that he's consistently selfish.
He's consistently selfish, consistently a rat. Like, Anyway, so the next thing we kind of like encounter is that these two French noblemen come and they give Bertram a letter from his mom that says like, hey, just by the way, the king is super displeased with you and the way that you've like handled your marriage to Helen, that you didn't do what you needed to do in regards to her. And we've all just found out that on her way to her pilgrimage, she died. And you're probably happy to hear that your wife died. And that kind of makes you even more of like a turd. And like, he is like, oh yeah, it's a mix of good and bad fortunes, a mingled yarn, good and ill together. And it's like, wow, buddy, you're a jerk. So Bertram then is like, okay, I'll return to France because now that my wife is dead, I'll make amends to the king and smooth that out, and then I'll remarry like somebody else. So the Countess, she's really upset. She's trying to smooth things over with the king and everything. And the king's LeFou, whatever like position he has in court or whatever, he's like telling the Countess like, hey, so just so you know, I talked to the king, and now that Helen is dead, we think we can probably arrange for him to marry one of my daughters, one of LeFou's daughters, because, you know, I want them to have a high class marriage. You guys are high class. We're all high class, like individuals. And now that like Helen is deceased, you know, we can do that. Especially he has distinguished himself in battle. So there's like good things to like say about him. I'm comfortable with him marrying one of my daughters. And they're like, okay, that sounds great. Meanwhile, Helen, the widow, and Helen, the widow, Diana, they've gone to the King of France. And so the King of France is going to be sending all of them as like an envoy from him to the king under their protection or whatever. So we have like the Countess and the King, and they're both lamenting the death of Helen because she was so amazing. Both of them are like, oh, she had such wonderful character. We're sad that Bertram never realized what a wonderful wife she was. But the Countess is like, please forgive my son for like all the stuff he has like done in like his youth. So the King is like, all is forgiven, all is forgotten. Like, it's fine. Let's move forward from here. And they're like, all right, that sounds awesome. So they're starting to like get married. They're starting to get ready for LeFou's daughter to marry Bertram. Bertram gets there, apologizes to the king. King's like, it's fine. No worries. Like, let's just get this like marriage underway. So right before the wedding is going to get underway, LeFou asks for Bertram to give him like a little token, like a promise ring to give to his daughter. So Bertram pulls out the ring that Diana / Helen had given him, except that the ring that he gave to LeFou is the king's ring that the king had given to Helen. So when Bertram takes off the ring and hands it to LeFou, LeFou looks at it and is like, wait, where did you get this ring? Because the king's looking at it, LeFou's looking at it. They both know that it was the king's ring and that he had given it to Helen. And Bertram is like, just a woman I met in Florence gave it to me. And they were like, no, we gave Helen this ring. This was on Helen's finger. Wait, have you seen Helen? And Bertram's like, no, I haven't seen Helen. And they're like, did you kill Helen? We thought that she died like on this pilgrimage, but now we're starting to wonder if maybe you were so upset you had her killed. And Bertram is like, I didn't have her killed. I don't know. There was like a woman who is interested in me in Florence. I think she gave it to me as like a gift. And they're like, what are you talking about? That doesn't sound plausible at all because it's not the truth either. I mean, even because like this is him not wanting to admit in front of everybody that he had tried to hook up with Diana. Like, that's what it is. He is lying to everybody, but not in the way that they think that he's lying. But he is lying to cover up the fact that he was acting despicable towards women while he was out promising Diana, oh, no, I really want to marry you. I really want to marry you. When he didn't, hooking up with this woman when they're not married. And so he's like trying to cover it up by being like, I don't know how this ring that you gave Helen got in my hands. And they're like, oh my gosh, I think you killed Helen. And LeFou was like, you can't marry my daughter if like you're a murderer. So at this point, a man, like a gentleman walks in and he's carrying this kind of letter from that, like that envoy of like ladies that we talked about earlier. And it's a letter written by Diana claiming that Bertram had seduced her and promised to marry her before he fled from Florence. So the king like reads over, they're like looking at the string being like, did you kill Helen? And then they're reading over this thing that's like, he hooked up with me in Florence. He promised to marry me. And like now he needs to like make do. And LeFou is like, oh my gosh, I almost married this guy to like one of my daughters and he's doing who knows what like out there. And Bertram is like, oh my gosh, like freaking out. And at that point, Diana and the widow enter, like they like come in to talk to the king. And it's all really confusing because the way that Diana's talking, she's pretending that she's his wife, talking about like, oh no, like I'm his wife, blah, 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 blah. And Diana asked the king to ask Bertram if he took her virginity, like if they had like hooked up. And Bertram was like, no. Like, she's a common gamester to the camp, meaning like, no, this is like a prostitute that serviced the soldiers, which Diana was not. And so now he's like making up this lie to the king about like, no, I didn't do anything to her. She's a prostitute. Even like, he knows that he's lying, but he doesn't care. He's lying anyway, being like, no, I wouldn't have done that. Like, she's like a prostitute. And she says, oh, Parolles can testify in my case. And so the king calls in Parolles, or Paroles, what are we calling him? Paroles. And Bertram's like, you can't trust him. He's like a known liar. And then Diana produces Bertram's ring. And is like, I have his ring. And the king was like, Bertram, how does she have your ring? And then Bertram had to admit, okay, I used it to seduce her, but I didn't plan on marrying her. And so Diana's like, okay, see, so you're like a piece of turd. You're like an absolute piece of crap. She says that she'll give him his ring back in exchange for hers. And that's the ring that is actually Helen's. So the king asked Bertram, wait, what's your story again about like Helen's ring? And he confesses that he had lied to the king about someone just like giving him this like ring. So he admits, oh no, okay. So what I said there, that was a lie. I got the ring from Helen. I didn't kill Helen. I got it from this lady. And the king is like, okay, this is like all trash. Like, so you've been lying to me like several times. So Parolles comes in. And Parolles is like, oh, yeah, I know that Bertram like was like hooking up with women. He, had this plan to like go back and sleep with like Diana and promised her marriage and stuff. And so now the king is like turning to Diana and he's like, okay, why do you have Helen's ring? Because like, I don't understand how you got Helen's ring. And Diana was like, I never bought it and I wasn't given it and it wasn't borrowed from anyone. And the king is like, I don't want to play your little like whatever like trickster games. Tell me the truth or I'm going to kill you. Because it's like whatever little like word games you're playing, like I'm not into it. I don't like riddles. I'm going to murder you. Tell me the truth. So then that's when Diana finally says, okay, Bertram thinks that he's guilty, but he's not guilty. He thinks that he slept with me, but he did not actually sleep with me. And the king again is like, please stop telling riddles. I'm going to throw you in jail. Like, I'm so sick of whatever is happening right now. And like, it's just so funny because it's like, he hath abused me, but never harmed me. He got his wife with child, even one that you think is dead. And that's when Helen like is like, bam, enters the room and is like, what now? Y'all thought I was dead, but I'm not. So everyone's like, oh my gosh, you're alive. You didn't die like on your like pilgrimage. So Helen like shows Bertram the letter that he had written her back when they like got married, which now at this point in the time period of things is months have gone by. She's like visibly pregnant. And she was like, in this letter, you said that if I got your ring and I was pregnant with your child, you are now mine. You are doubly won by me. And then the king's like, Helen, what's happening? I hate all of this. And then Bertram is just basically like, oh, you're right. You got me. And then at the end of the play, it's so crazy because the king, like at the end, it really is like you're left there being like, wow, yeah, that all did happen. And then in that like final scene, the king just like walks out alone on stage and basically like tells the audience like, well, that's the end of our play. Wow. All's well that ends well. Please show your appreciation by clapping for this. And everyone's kind of like, what the crap? Because it's like, in the same way that those soldiers rip off Parolles' blindfold and show him like, you just crap talked all of these men in this room. We all heard you. We tricked you into crap talking all of this. Now all of us hate you. That's what they do to Bertram in that last scene, is basically make him confess to, well, I thought I was hooking up with random ladies and like promising them marriage with like no intention. I thought that I was like being this jerk. I even was like, oh, yay, my wife is dead. I can't wait to marry this other guy's daughter because she's highborn. Like, he does all this crappy stuff and they basically like take off the blindfold. Helen like walks in and is like, boom, you thought I was dead, but I'm not. And I tricked you into getting me pregnant. Now we're married. And it's like, oh, yay, you did it.
Like, how are we supposed to cheer for any of these people?
You won. Yay. And this is why it's called a problem play. Because you get that comedy happily ever after of like, yay, the couples who are supposed to be coupled up are coupled up. Even like the king promises Diana, because of like her virtue, her honesty, her helping Helen, that he's going to pay for her dowry to marry a nobleman. So like you've got like two couples theoretically are now going to be happily ever after. Major air quotes. So, I guess it's a comedy because you have people getting married at the end, but you don't feel good about it. No one feels good about it. And Shakespeare does this, like he shows all of this happening by using this folktale and then coupling it with this other man character. Because you're going to see in this, when Jeff finally retells this tale, I'm sorry, I was like, I'm going to recap it in 15 minutes. Lies, freaking lies.
It's a tough one to recap because it's like very confusing and you have to understand what's happening.
Yeah.
Like people are pretending to be people. And so like that has to be very clear.
Yeah. Where it's like you have a lot of names, a lot of moving characters.
Yeah.
And I realized, because I basically was going to cut out all of the Parolles part because I was like, that's not important, like really to the folktale that we're talking about. But then I realized like it is important because that's the part that Shakespeare added to get to the point that he is making, because he took a known folktale, which I'm assuming he gets to the end of that folktale when he's like reading it or hearing it performed. And he's like, this is weird because it's not a happily ever after. People act like, oh yeah. And then he tricked her and now they're married and they live happily ever after. And I think he wanted to represent that story to an audience that knew that story, but adding in these other despicable character to be like, they're both despicable. And then this woman being so like, no, I'm going to get what I want. I'm going to get the thing that I want. I want the thing that I want so bad. I'm going to get it by any means necessary. And so then when she finally gets the thing that she wants, this man, it's like, do you even want him anymore? Because you've basically exposed that he is a piece of trash and he's always been a piece of trash. Why do you want this piece of trash so bad? She had the option to marry any of the other noblemen in the court, and she picked him because she had like a childhood infatuation with him. She could have picked an actual good guy who wanted her. And so you get to the end of the play and you're like, girl, why did you even want this guy? Like, yeah, you did it. You won him.
But you wanted something dumb that you shouldn't have wanted.
Anyway, but now Jeff is going to be retelling a tale. It's called Catherine the Wise. And this is an Italian folk tale. It's found in I believe it's found in the Pantheon Italian folk tales collection. And Italo Calvino, he got it from like an 1875 collection of Sicilian folk tales by Giuseppe Petra. And this is just kind of like another take on it because I was like, do I want to retell the one from the Decameron when it's basically the exact same story? I was like, no, I don't. I want it to be slightly different.
And I'm glad you picked this one because I think this one's a fun one.
I think so too.
And it goes a little something like this. In fair Palermo, where we lay our scene. So in Palermo, which is in Italy, there lived a very important shopkeeper. And he was like apparently very successful, very wealthy. But he was a shopkeeper, not necessarily like, he's a merchant class, not noble class, which will become important later. Well, not that much later, very soon. And he had a daughter, and her name was Catherine. From a super young age, it was obvious that she was very, very intelligent. She was great at reading and writing and languages and all sorts of things. And her opinion was valued by her father and others, like in the matters of their household and whatever was going on. And so because of that, because she was so intelligent, he called her Catherine the Wise, which is the title of this tale. And it is nice.
It's the titular title.
But when Catherine was 16, her mother died, and she was very, very, very sad about this, as you can imagine. Yeah. And she shut herself in a room where she basically ate and slept, refusing to come out, refusing to partake in any social activities of any kind. No strolls, no trips to the theater, no entertainment. And I was like, this sounds familiar. I think we know the cure for this. We just need some random old lady to show her a woodsy scene, and she'll be laughing in no time.
That always gets me going.
So the shopkeeper's like, okay, I got to figure out something to do because this is really, really sad. He's very, very concerned for his daughter. And so he calls together a bunch of dudes, his council of dudes, to ask what he should do. He would said to them that he was concerned because Catherine had been, quote, keeping to the house like a cat and won't stick her head outside, which I don't know. I thought that was funny, just comparing her to a cat, because I have a cat that's very much wants nothing to do with the outside, and that's because we rescued him from the outside when he was a kitten. Our other cat, who was born inside, in foster care before we adopted him as a kitten, is obsessed with outside and wants to be out there. And it's he just doesn't know. The other cat's like, bro, you don't know what's out there. You don't know how good you have it in here.
It's like, no, you want to be an inside cat. Never wish for the outside.
But anyway, so this council of dudes convened, and they suggested hey, why don't we open up a school for Catherine to lead? Because she's so smart. People always come to her to ask her opinion on stuff. She likes to give it. She'll be great at it and she'll love it. And so the father's like, you know what? That sounds like a great idea. And they're thinking that this will be something to distract her from her grief, get her to work through her grief and, get it out of her system. Yeah. And so he proposes this idea to his daughter, Catherine, who was instantly charmed by the idea.
I love that idea of just oh, you're bummed out. How about you go after an intellectual pursuit? Then let's do something that stretches your mind and helps you to connect with your community through your brain.
Yeah, and if you have a very active mind and the only thing that you have to focus that on is your grief, then then
it's like a cycle. You get stuck in a cycle where your brain is capable of amazing and incredible things, but if it's putting all of that amazing incredibleness into your grief,
it's just gonna spiral you down that way.
Yeah.
So getting her to use that brain power for something else was a good idea, and she was excited about it. And so she went about organizing the school, hired teachers, and put up a sign that said, whoever wishes to study at Catherine the Wise's is welcome, free of charge, which was also a very nice thing to do, to not even charge people for it. And so boys and girls and children of all ages started flocking to the school. And as all these people of various social classes came to the school, and she would sit them, side by side, all next to each other, no matter where they fell in, the social strata. And she treated everyone equally. And included in that treatment, which was allowing everyone to come and learn, was also the way that she enforced discipline in her school with a cat o' nine tails. She didn't care if you were low or highborn. She was going to whip you. You didn't do one of your lessons? Whack!
Ooh, free of charge.
Free of charge. Where can you get a nice whack with a cat o' nine tails free of charge in this economy? I tell you what, nowhere.
Sign me up for that OnlyFans. No.
So the reputation of the school starts to spread, and it reaches all the way up to the palace. And the prince himself decides to attend Catherine's school. Why? I don't know.
He's kinky.
Yeah, he was like, they're whipping people here? Nice. So he goes to the school in disguise. And one day when he fails to answer one of the questions that Catherine poses to him, she dealt him a backhanded blow from which his cheek still smarts today.
Oh, so she didn't whip him. She
didn't whip
backhanded him.
She backhanded him. Well, it says a backhanded blow. When I first read it, I read it as like she did a backhanded blow, like with, because you could do like, a backhanded tennis, serve or swing or whatever, So I thought that's what it was. But then later on, they like very specifically call it a slap, which I don't think you would call it a slap with the cat of nine tails.
Yeah.
But I mean, and it wasn't a slap. It was a backhanded slap,
Yeah. So he got an answer wrong. She wasn't impressed with him not doing his homework, for being a dummy.
Yeah. It wasn't even that he didn't get the answer, that he got the answer wrong. He couldn't answer, I think, is what it sounds like.
Man.
She's like, when he posed a question and he couldn't answer, she gave him a backhanded blow.
Look, I did not graduate with a degree in education, like, secondary education or anything like that. But I am going to push back a little bit on the way that she is teaching her pupils. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's good pedagogy. That's just my 2 cents.
9 out of 10 educators would agree.
But I don't know. I'm like, I think I know, because he was like an older prince, right? Like, he was like, probably like an adult man. And so I don't know, maybe in college, maybe it works.
What's it called? There's like a term that they're using. Best practices.
It's not best practices.
Best practices in pedagogy involves backhanding your pupils when they can't answer or get the answer wrong.
Your dad works in higher education.
Yeah, he's backhanding people all the time.
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably people that he's taught where he's like, maybe.
It's like, I wish
maybe it'll help him.
Yeah, I don't know.
We're just kidding. People shouldn't be hitting each other.
No, not without consent, enthusiastic consent.
Yeah. Safe, sane, and consensual.
Which is what I kind of thought this was going with, because so it does actually say that the prince was like pretty mad about getting backhanded, but then, enraged and intrigued by Catherine and her brazenness, he returns to the palace to talk to daddy and demands to his daddy that he be able to marry Catherine the Wise, despite the fact that she's from a lower social class than he.
And what did daddy say?
Daddy said, heck yeah, you can marry Catherine the Wise. But it's kind of like, I was so confused. Like, wait, she backhands you across the face. I mean, I was thinking like this prince is into some kinky stuff.
Yeah.
Because he liked getting backhanded, but he didn't. He really didn't. He had a plan.
I think it's one of those things where he was so used to being the one in power that nobody had ever treated him like that. But the roles are reversed. Like if you're into school, especially, what'd you say? You said he was into disguise. Yeah. So she thought that the power imbalance when he was in her class was she was in power and he'd never experienced somebody else, is probably especially like a woman, being like, actually, no, I'm the one in power. And so he was like, I didn't like that. I want her to not be in charge anymore.
Yeah. And so like by marrying her, it's like she's then like subservient to him.
Yeah.
I see that.
He's like, I'm not a bottom, I'm a top. I'm not a submissive, I'm a dom. And then she's like, I don't think so.
Yes, he certainly tries to, assert his dominance. So the king is like, this is a great idea for you to marry this person, even though she's outside of your social class, which we make very clear is not normal. That's not something that you're supposed to do that you usually do, but we're going to do it. Because I think her, the reputation of her school, the reputation of her, she was, and also her dad was like super rich. They were like close. They were like nobility without like titles or whatever, basically. This is what it sounds like. And so the king summons Catherine's father, and it's like, hey, you know what? The father is the shopkeeper is actually the one that's like, hey, like, that there's this social class difference thing. And the king's like, no problem. It's fine. Sonny Boy wants what Sonny Boy wants, and Sonny Boy is going to get what he's going to get. And to my surprise, Catherine accepts the proposal. Like, nice. I can't remember the exact wording that they say, but it's like kind of like somewhat enthusiastically accepts the proposal.
Well, that's good that she's like, yeah, you know what? Well, dude, especially because like he was in disguise in her class. So she might have kind of thought like, oh, I guess this is like a reward for just being so excellent at what I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
For like doing well, making the kingdom a better place.
Making Palermo great again.
Yep. Make Palermo great again.
Oh, you know what? Okay, so she just said, so the shopkeeper returned home. Catherine, the prince wants to wed you. What do you have to say about that? I accept. So that was not that enthusiastic.
Yeah, she was like, okay.
She's like, affirmative. Yes.
I've done worse things on a Tuesday.
It was very neutral. So anyway, preparations were made and quickly made. I think it's like within a week or something. Within a week's time, everything had been prepared. And the prince was all set to marry Catherine in the royal chapel with 12 bridesmaids in attendance, which I thought was interesting that they specified the number of bridesmaids.
Yeah.
And that number was 12. I feel like it's one of those things where, I don't know.
Disciples?
If you're from the time and place, that would probably mean something, or at least just be like, oh, that's the proper number of bridesmaids or something. But it's like the fact that it's mentioned makes me feel like has some relevance, but I'm like, I don't see what that is.
Yeah.
So after the wedding ceremony, the queen tells the bridesmaids to go and undress the newlywed princess, Catherine, for bed. But the prince like, nope, no need to undress her. Go away. No need to keep a guard outside the door. Leave us alone. And so they're like, all right. And they all take off. And so when the prince gets Catherine alone after the wedding, he confronts her and he says, Catherine, do you remember the slap you gave me? Are you sorry for it? And Catherine responds, sorry for it? If you ask for it, I'll do it again.
I love her.
Yeah, she's amazing. The prince is not happy about this. So he opens up a trapdoor in the floor to reveal like this deep pit down and starts unwinding a rope. And he's like, Catherine, you either say sorry right now or I'm going to lower you down into this pit.
Oh, geez, Louise.
And Catherine's like,
it puts the lotion on its skin or else it gets the hose again.
Exactly. And Catherine's like, fine, it'll be cooler down there anyway. And so the prince like ties the rope around her and starts lowering her down into the pit. She gets down there and all she sees down there is a little table, a chair, a pitcher of water, and a piece of bread. So she's living like the real prison diet.
Yeah, geez.
Glass of water, crust of bread.
Well, that's good. That's nice that he went ahead and pre-planned what he was going to like put in the pit for her when she got down there. It's not just a hole.
No.
He's like, no. I had to put some furniture into this hole.
Exactly. So the next morning, the king and queen come to greet the new bride, as is customary. But the prince is like, whoa, hold up. No, you can't see Catherine. She's not feeling well. Just, go away and maybe come back another day. And so they leave. And as soon as they leave, the prince opens the trapdoor again and calls down to Catherine. And he's like, hey, Catherine, what kind of night did you spend down in that pit? And she's like, pleasant and refreshing. And so he's like, ugh. Did you consider the slap that you gave me? And she says, no, I didn't. I'm thinking of the one I owe you now.
He's like, you know what? No, I did not give it a second thought. But you know what? When you get me back out of this hole, you can full expect to get backhanded. Once
again. And so the prince, not happy about this. I just imagine that he slams the trapdoor in a huff and stomps off.
Oh man, this guy who he really thought he was doing something.
Yeah. He's like, I've got a plan. I'm going to show her. Yeah. And he's like, just makes him look all the more pathetic and weak. The more he attempts to get the best of her.
Yeah. What he did not realize was that what he had done was encounter a woman who is I would rather die than admit that maybe I shouldn't have hit you.
She's like, no, I was absolutely right to hit you when you're a stupid student, and I'm absolutely right to hit you now when you let me up out of this pit.
Yeah, for being a crappy husband.
Yeah.
So she's like, no, obviously I'm not going to apologize for something I don't feel sorry for, and I wasn't in the wrong. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. She's an icon. So 2 days go by, and she starts to get very hungry because she'd only had a piece of bread and a glass of water to eat. And so she took a stay from out of her corset. I don't know exactly what a stay is, but I can imagine when you say it's like a piece of corset. And she started digging a hole in the wall with it.
Oh yeah, because there's part of me that wonders, I don't know that much about corsets, except that I know that they're
So I know they have those bone, whalebone, stuff.
Yeah.
And it, like, I guess it used to actually be made of like whalebone, but now it's just called like boning, but it's like
But yeah, it
just the
used to
stuff is made of like
be,
plastic or whatever.
Yeah. And so I'm guessing, it's like it's sharp, it's hard, and she was like industrious.
Yeah, she made use of the tools that she had with her to start digging a hole in the wall. And so she dug and dug and dug, and 24 hours later, she finally saw a tiny little sliver of light peering in. And just then, she noticed her father's clerk, Don Tommaso, walking by.
Don Tommaso.
Which is hilarious. So, one of my things is I'm always annoyed when they just have like the princess and they call her the princess, the princess, the princess, the princess. And then finally, like at the end of the story, and they're like, Maria, because that was her name this whole time. Catherine gets a name right off the bat. Prince never gets a name.
Yeah.
He's just the prince this whole time. Yeah. But then it's like Don Tommaso, like her father doesn't even have a name. He's just the shopkeeper or like the father. Like Don Tommaso, who's like the clerk that appears literally this one time in the entire story, like gets a name. And I'm like, wait, why does this guy get a name?
One of the most important characters in the whole thing.
I mean, it's a good name,
Of course.
Just like Don Tommaso.
But why weren't the names passed out to everybody?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, so Don Tommaso's walking by, so she calls out to him, Don Tommaso, Don Tommaso. And he's like, he said like he couldn't imagine what this voice was or where it was coming from. And I just pictured him looking around like confused, like that gif of John Travolta from Pulp Fiction, like, And you all can picture that in your minds too. I acted it out for Katrina, but I know that you can't see.
I know the meme.
Just search John Travolta, Pulp Fiction, confused, like you'll see it. And so she calls out again. She says, "It's me, Catherine the Wise." And she did that because she is Catherine the Wise and apparently not Catherine the Humble.
Or the Humbleable.
Yeah. Did you need to? That's true.
She's not humbleable.
It's like, did you need to like say the Wise? Maybe there could be other Catherines around.
Yeah.
So she gets his attention. Finally. And so she tells Don Tommaso to bring her father to her right away so that she can talk to him. And so the father comes and she's like, "Look, father, as luck would have it, I have found myself in the bottom of a pit."
And he was kind of like, you know what? I thought somebody someday might. You kind of have that personality.
So I was going to say that they came up with a plan, but no, she actually tells her father what the plan is. And the plan that she wants...
What's he going to do? He's just, some man.
Yeah. He doesn't even have a name in the story.
Yeah.
Like he's going to come up with this plan. So she tells him to have workers build a secret underground passage that goes all the way from their palace to the prince's palace, which I was like, thought it was interesting that their house is called the palace. Like they must be really rich.
Like how wealthy are they?
And in the meantime, so she's like a passage from the pit to the palace with arches and lights, like torches every 20 feet. So that she could have light to see as she's like going back and forth. And so in the meantime, her father is bringing her some food regularly. It says roast chicken and nourishing dishes, which I imagine to be like, number 9 Chalupa Supreme combo from Taco Bell with a Baja Blast.
I'm so glad like she like is getting food because I immediately was like, how long does this guy think he can keep her down there? And is he planning on like killing her?
Yeah.
Like, is he that committed to it that he's like willing to like let her die in there?
Yeah.
So now that she has food, I'm sure she will be totally happy down there.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
She doesn't have to. She doesn't have to deal with this man's bullcrap.
No. Nope. And she's not going to be down there for all. She's going to be down there just as long as it takes to build a tunnel.
Yeah.
But anyway. So, but in the meantime, 3 times a day, the prince is opening the trapdoor and yelling down to her like, "Are you sorry yet, Catherine, for the slap that you gave me?" And Catherine responds in the iconic way that she does. "Sorry for what? Just imagine the slap you're going to get from me now, after being down here for a week or a month or however long it's been."
Oh, man. Because I'm like, bro, you're making it so much worse for yourself. Like,
oh, yeah.
The longer that you treat this person...
I mean, I can only imagine that he is thinking like he's like starving her out. You know what I mean? Like at some point she's going to be like her need to survive her,
will outweigh her pride that she's like feeling where she like can't say that she's like sorry. But man, I'm so on her side about this where I'm like, You're not that like, because again, I said that I don't think that pupils should like get hit, but again, he purposely signed up for that class. He purposely signed up to go to that school, got in a costume to like go to that school or a disguise or like whatever. And he knew what would happen. Like he knew that other students were getting hit and he was willing to go anyway. But then when he got hit, he just couldn't deal with it. So even though, again, I don't think students should like be hit, I don't think she was wrong. And I side with her. And maybe that's what's wrong with me. I can also, maybe this is why this story is so iconic for me, is that I absolutely see myself in like that character of like Helen and like this like Catherine of sometimes I want to be right.
More than you want to be alive.
More than like I want to be like correct. Like
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Like you want to be right, but more than you want to like do the right. I mean, right,
or like
do the
be
right
at
thing.
Peace.
But
because there's that balance between like, do you want to be at peace or do you want to be right? And I feel like
I want to be right.
I want to be right. I want to be right so much. Like to the point where I'm like, no, I feel like I am at peace because people who are like that.
I'm right.
Yeah. I have peace in the fact that I'm right. And
it's not my fault that you can't deal with it.
Yeah. Maybe you should learn
to not be wrong. Dummy.
Oh, I love it.
Maybe you'd backhand those people, they would learn.
I do love when our like episodes turn into like therapy where it's like, oh no, is this maybe something that I need to examine within myself? No.
Maybe.
Because I'm right.
I too, in this situation, because it's so obvious what like a dummy and a jerk that this guy is, like, I'm like totally on her side the whole time. And I want to see, this is the type of story that I want to see like a modern remake, like a movie of or something, or like a TV show episode, at least an episode. But anyway, so he's like, are you sorry? And she's like, sorry for what? I've just been down here thinking about how I'm going to smack the taste out of your mouth or whatever. So enough time passes that the workers finish the tunnel. And so now like she's in the clear. She's like, she can pass through to her father's house and like be totally in comfort. So she just like waits until after the prince has checked on her. She's like, and then she like taunts him and yells at stuff at him. And then like she just walks through the tunnel back to her house and does whatever she wants all day. And then like comes back later, just be like, yeah, you're a loser. I'm going to smack you if you let me up out of here.
I love like imagining her like in her dad's house, just like sitting, relaxing, like eating fine food, reading a book, just like enjoying herself. And then she's like oh, look at the time for me to like walk back over just to be like, you're a piece of crap and you always will be a piece of crap. And then she just like walks back over to her house, has a peaceful night's sleep in her bed, wakes up, then like walks herself back over.
Does it all over again.
Did you have a good night? She's like, yeah, I did. What about you? Sleeping alone like a loser?
Yeah, it's pretty great. So the prince did not think it was so great. And so it's not long before the prince was pretty fed up with Catherine's very apparent lack of remorse.
Yeah.
And like not even a budge towards that. Like she just keeps to be like further entrenching herself the other way.
Yeah.
And so he's like,
which I'm sure had to be confusing for him, and that he probably was like, how is she not dying?
Yeah. It's like, must be some big rats down there that she's eating raw or whatever.
Well, because I'm like, my brain's also like, where was she pooping? Or like, where did he think she was pooping?
I think he's just a dummy and he didn't think about it. Like he doesn't even realize, doesn't think about it. That's what it seems like.
He's like, she has to be miserable down there, right? And she keeps being like, not changed at all in the least bit, but it's fine. He can't tell. I guess she's so far down there that he's like, But yeah, he must be like, how is this woman, one, still alive, and two, still so spiteful?
Yeah.
Spiteful until the end. That is me.
And so he is sick of it. And he goes to her and opens the trapdoor one day to announce that he is going to be leaving for Naples by saying, Catherine, I'm leaving for Naples. Do you have something that you want to tell me before I go? And so she calls back up. She's like, have a good time. Enjoy yourself. And write to me when you arrive in Naples. And so like, and this too, it's like, why I can see it in my mind and why it's so good. Like the prince then kind of like, shocked that is like, how could she say that? Like it's like the plan was to threaten to leave, but he like wasn't really going to leave almost, know? It's like, I'm going to leave and then you're going to die for sure because nobody knows you're down here or whatever.
Yeah.
And she's just like, have a good trip. Write me when you get there safely. Like text when you get home.
Cool. See you, loser.
And and this is his mistake where he like really loses any like remaining like leverage that he had, I think, where he's like, so I should go, like, are you sure? And
I'm gonna do
response,
it. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it.
Her response, amazing. He's like, so I should go, and she yells back up, what? Are you still there? So I told you to go. Have a good time.
Iconic.
And so the prince leaves, and Catherine is like, I've got an awesome prank I'm going to play on this guy. So as soon as the prince like slams the trapdoor in a tiff again.
Yeah.
Catherine like runs off to her dad's house. She's like, Father, prepare a brigantine, servants, fine clothes, furniture, all this stuff. I'm going to Naples. And so she sets up to rent a palace right across from the royal palace. And because she set sail on a smaller ship than the prince, she arrived in Naples before him.
Nice.
And I thought it was funny too, because like the narrator, author, whatever, was like, little vessels, make better time than big ones. And so in Naples, Catherine comes out onto the balcony of her palace every day and just starts wearing these like progressively more elaborate, more beautiful gowns. And so the prince, of course, sees her and is struck by her beauty and her resemblance to Catherine the Wise, his wife that is locked in a pit back in Palermo, or so he thinks.
I love that. I love that he's like, oh my gosh, that lady looks like my wife. That's hot. Maybe I want to hook up.
And so he sends a messenger to her, and then he goes and visits her himself. And so the prince, believing Catherine to be a new woman that just happens to look exactly like his wife, visits her every day until one day he's basically like, yo, you single? And she's like, yes, you? And he's like, yeah, isn't it obvious? And it's like, you mean obvious what an obnoxious jerk you are? Yeah.
God, it is.
You are. It is very obvious that you are a single loser. He says, you remind me of a maiden who captured my fancy in Palermo, which is like the pinnacle of romance, to tell a woman that you like her because she looks like some other woman that you like had a crush on or something. That's the key.
But he also doesn't realize, like, I don't know how embarrassing that also is, because he's basically like telling her like, oh my gosh, you look like this super hot lady that I was really into before. And she knows that it's her.
Yeah.
So it's like he can't even play it cool that like, because when he put her in the pit, he could have, like it kind of sends this message that like, I don't like you. I didn't marry you because I liked you. I married you because like I want to get revenge. Except that now he's like saying he's, like, to so her obsessed on accident that he's like, oh my gosh, this lady that I'm so in love with, but we had like a complicated relationship. She's so, oh my gosh, I think about her all the time, and you look like her. And it's like so embarrassing.
As stupid of a thing as that is to say to like a woman that you think is not the same woman, which is a very stupid thing to say.
Yeah.
To a woman you're trying to like woo or whatever. It's an especially stupid and embarrassing thing to say to like that woman that you're like, I'm so not over you that I'm trying to go after this person that I think is not you but looks just like you.
Yeah. It's like when you accidentally text the wrong person. Oh my gosh, I have such a huge crush on this guy. He's so hot. And then you realize like you sent it to that guy. That's embarrassing.
Yeah. So anyway.
I'm embarrassed for him.
The prince then asks her to marry him. And she says yes. And this is the thing I was thinking of earlier, actually, when I was like, oh, she was like enthusiastic. Because actually what she says is, with pleasure, my prince. Because obviously she went through like Chick-fil-A customer service training. With pleasure.
It would be my pleasure.
And anyway, after a week, they were married. And then 9 months later, what do you think happened?
A baby.
Catherine gave birth to a baby boy who was, it says, a marvel to behold.
Aww.
He must take after his mom. And the prince asks Catherine what they should name the boy. And so Catherine says that they should name him Naples.
Yeah, because that's where they hooked up.
Yeah.
Always name a baby where you conceived them.
Yes, exactly.
That's why your son is named Taco Bell.
That's why my son is named Parking Lot of a Denny's. So 2 years go by, and this prince, I guess, gets bored with this super hot wife that he has, and he decides to leave for Genoa.
Again, what a loser.
Yeah.
These men are losers.
I don't understand what, like, it doesn't say that he's bored. It's just like, oh, after 2 years, he decides that he's going to leave for Genoa. And it's like, it seems like the whole, like, she doesn't go with him. It seems like the plan is not for her to go with him.
Yeah.
Or for his, like, his son, the prince. And it says, too, like, when he decides that he's going to go to Genoa, Catherine did not like it. But the prince had made up his mind, and there was nothing that she could say that was going to change it.
Yeah.
So it's his turn to be stubborn, I guess. So the prince drafts a document that declares Naples, born in Naples, as his heir, and he takes off. And so Catherine organizes a similar plan to the plan that she came up with before, and she arrives in Genoa before the prince by taking another brigantine, servants, and she once again rents a place, a palace opposite the royal palace. And once again, she puts on a little show to attract the prince's attention. And once again, the prince is struck by the beauty of this woman, this different woman that looks exactly like his wife. I wonder if what she said is, she obviously didn't say her name was Catherine every single time. Like, that would, even as big of an idiot as this guy is, like, he would pick up on that, be like,
yeah, he'd be like, oh my gosh, this woman that I knew in a different city, her name was Catherine.
And she looks exactly like you and, like, behaves like you.
Because I'm like, here's the thing. I find it more believable that the first time he was like, no possible way I left that lady in a pit. There's no way that she would be out of the pit.
Yeah. And, like, to get there before me.
She looks like the person who just had his kid.
Yeah.
And, like, I'm sorry, but, like,
he would be even more familiar with, like, what she looks like.
Like, like, weird. You have the exact same stretch marks that
and he's been seeing her every day for, like, because when they got married, it was like he saw her, he went to her school, he got backhanded.
Yeah.
Then they, like, maybe saw each other during that week while they're preparing the wedding. They're married. He throws her into a pit and he doesn't see her up close for, like, however long until he, like, leaves, you know. But this time he's seeing her
naked,
I would assume, every day.
Yeah. Hooking up.
But anyway, so he's obviously an idiot.
And also, once again, these are fairy tales. Sometimes we go hard into the logic of things where it's like, it doesn't need logical.
No, it doesn't. So yeah, he's struck by this hottie that looks like his wife in both Naples and Palermo. And so he does the same thing, goes to, you know, start talking to her, starts chatting her up, and does the whole, yo, you single? And she's like, I'm a widow. And you? Which I love this because now that she's his wife twice over now.
Yeah.
And it's like, and he should know, he should recognize her. Like, he shouldn't be falling for the stupid plan. But it's like, now this person's like, the first time he had some stupid thing, but now they've been living as husband and wife for 2 straight years. And he, like, abandons her to go, like, elsewhere and is, like, hitting on the first person that looks like her in this new city.
Yeah.
It's like, that's weird. This guy has some weird, like, again, we just talked about how there's, like, no logic, but it's like, if this were, like, a real life person, like, they were, like, so deeply humiliated by being backhanded in this place that, like, it created this, like, weird, I don't know, psychological issue where it's like he has to keep trying to, like, marry this same woman, but, like, when he has her, he, like, because she's smarter and better than him, like, it's like, no, I have to get this woman, but this time I'm going to be the dominant one or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, but enough of this. We'll get back to the
enough psychological analysis on this man.
But I just thought, so the point of me saying all that was, like, I thought it was, like, such a BA line to be like, to say to your husband that you are still married to when he thinks you're someone else hitting on you.
Yeah.
When he asks if you're single, you'd be like, no, I'm a widow.
Because you're dead to me.
Like, that's like that's like a cold as ice line that you could say in that moment. So again, props to Catherine the Wise for coming up with that line. And so the prince also claims to be a widower with a son. So at least he's honest about the fact that he has a son.
Yeah.
But then he falls back on his best and only line of comparing this new woman to the hotties that he knew back in Naples and Palermo. Like, oh man, you remind me of these beautiful women that I knew. It's like, dude, you don't have to say that. Why are you saying that?
Yeah, that's so embarrassing for you.
But Catherine's like, oh, really? Well,
literally just say, like, you're the hottest woman I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. Just leave it there.
Yeah.
Maybe he's like trying to do some, like pickup artist type of thing. It's like sort of like,
It's a little bit of negging.
yeah, it's like kind of like, it's like, oh, like you look like these other women that I knew, and they were pretty good looking, but it's like, I don't know if you're as good looking as me. I don't know.
Maybe you should show me everything you got going on, and I'll decide if you're like as hot as them or not.
Yeah. So anyway, so he tells her that she's as hot as these two other women that he knew, and she's like, oh, really? They say that we have 7 doubles in all the world. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, please tell me, as fun as this is to watch her like own this guy every time, like don't let this go on until he thinks that he's married all 7 of these like doubles throughout the world. That's what I'm like, no.
You're like, how long is this story going to go?
Sticks to the rule of 3s in this one. So as I just hinted at, he, asked her to marry him. They get married again within a week. And then 9 months later, Catherine gives birth to another son. And guess what? They named this son, Katrina.
Oh, I'm trying to remember what city they were in.
Genoa.
I'm going to guess his name is Genoa.
Salami. Prince Genoa Salami. Just kidding. Genoa. Yes, absolutely right. Named him after the city where he was conceived and born.
I love you so much. Thank you for saying that.
I was just like, oh, I love that was it, I didn't say Neapolitan ice cream for the Naples one because it's not Neapolitan, even though it is like that's what Neapolitan comes from, Naples, but this one was just like teed it right up over the plate, bam, right there.
Genoa Salami.
So thank Prince Genoa Salami, Prince Genoa. And again, they live for 2 years, and then the prince gets tired of this new wife and is like, hey, guess what, I'm gonna go to Venice, and so guess what, Genoa is my heir now. And so then because I'm like, again, like this liar with all these like implications, like because if he's like leaving a woman but signing a paper being like, oh yeah, but if anything happens to me, then like your kid is going to be the heir. But he's saying that to like every single woman. Extra embarrassing when he's saying it to the same woman. Yeah.
Because then they know that he's a lying piece of crap.
Yeah, they do. And once again, Catherine repeats her winning strategy. And I'm saying that non-sarcastically, unlike the sarcastically, I say like his winning strategy of telling all these women that they're as beautiful as these other women that he knows.
Yeah.
She gets on a faster ship, sets up in the palace across from the royal palace. And once again, the prince, she catches the prince's eye. He is bewildered by her resemblance to his now 3 previous wives, who are all the same wife. Really. He starts courting her, believing her to be a widow, and then saying that he is also a widower with 2 sons now.
Oh.
And then they get married within a week. And then this time, after 9 months, Catherine gives birth to a daughter.
Oh, okay. So
named Venice.
a little bit different from the rule of 3.
It's the rule of 3s. They got to mix it up on the third
Venice
time.
is a nice name.
Venice is a pretty nice name.
For a girl?
Cities in Italy. There are a lot of
like
potential
Florence.
names there. Yeah, Florence. So once again, 2 years later, the prince gets bored or whatever happens. And he this time decides to return to Palermo, which I don't understand the purpose behind this, but it is interesting. Again, my psychological evaluation would continue, except for the sake of the story, it won't. But as he leaves, he declares that Venice is his heir, which I thought was interesting too, because Venice is a
girl,
daughter and not a son. I was like, oh, that's cool. I like that. Anyway, so he returns to Palermo, which is interesting. But Catherine, in her way, gets to Palermo first and uses the underground passage from her father's house to return to her pit for the greatest surprise that she's ever to give this
He
man.
has got to think she's dead. He's been gone. It was 2 years in each place, right? So he's been gone like 6 years at least.
Yeah. He's like, she's got to be dead by now. And maybe that's it. He's like, maybe I finally won. Maybe I've finally gotten the better of this woman. I need to go back and prove it to myself because I wasn't able to do it by marrying these other identical women. So it says that the prince soon arrived in Palermo, and it says that he ran to the trapdoor, like he could not get there fast enough, and he pulled it open and he yells down, "Catherine, how are you?" Which I thought was
weird because it's like, dude, if anything answers, you should crap your pants, like in terror. It's a ghost.
Yeah. So he's like, "Catherine, how are you?" This is what I'm imagining now, that he's gleeful that he has won. So he's like sarcastically like, "Catherine,"
yelling it down to a corpse.
Yeah, like a skeleton down there. Like, "Catherine, how are you?" And so maybe he does poop his pants as she replies, "Oh, me? I'm fine."
She's like, "What, back so soon?"
That would be amazing. I thought you said you were going to Naples. But then when he sees that realizes she's alive, which again, it doesn't say anywhere in the text that he like thought that she was dead. It's just he runs back and it's like, Catherine, how are you? And she's like, fine, you loser. He goes back to his old like routine, like boots on in his brain where he's like, are you sorry about the slap you gave me yet? And she says, have you thought any about the slap that I owe you now? And then he's like, come on, Catherine, say that you're sorry or I'm going to take another wife. As if he hadn't done it.
I know, you piece of crap. Like,
and so she's just yells back up. She's like, go right ahead. No one's stopping you. And he's once again, like just shows his like desperation where he doesn't leave it there. He goes one last time. He's like, but if you say that you're sorry, I'll take you back. And she's basically just like, nah. And so he once again storms off and publicly declares that she is dead. And he starts looking for a new wife. And so in the process of looking for a new wife, he starts receiving portraits of these various princesses from all over Europe. And he's like swiping left and right on these like, portraits by like throwing them like, left into the fire or like right, like onto whatever the pile of his maybes. And it's like, dude's so shallow because it says too, he's like, he basically thought that the Princess of England was the best looking. So he's like, that's the one that I'm going to take. It doesn't say whether or not she resembled Catherine or not.
But we know he has a type.
Yeah, but it leads me to believe that she didn't. But anyway, he also might have been basing this off of the fact that he was like, I need like a woman from a city that would make for like a really good name for a child.
Yeah.
And it was like, and like London is better than Paris, Florence, Dallas, Fort Worth, like London it is. So they do whatever by post arrange for this whole wedding. And like the English royal family comes to Palermo for the wedding. And Catherine gets royal outfits prepared for her 3 children that she's brought with her, which I was also like, what was happening with the children? Did they get left behind?
Yeah, like were they
before then?
Were they being raised by like just a series of like governesses and stuff like that? Yeah. Or was she bringing them from palace to palace, but kind of keeping them hidden from
keeping
this
them
guy?
Like in the second palace?
Yeah,
and like going visiting them. That's probably what was happening.
Because I'm like, he's got like this 5-year-old, 3-year-old, 1-year-old.
Yeah, but it doesn't say. But I just, for the first time, was like, wait a minute, what were those kids doing the whole time? Because obviously he noticed his kids were there. Yeah. Because you'll see. So she gets these royal outfits prepared because all 3 of them are heirs to the throne.
Yeah, she got the letters.
And she took the hand of Naples, clothed as crown prince. So they get in the ceremonial carriage and ride off to meet the royal family arriving to Palermo for the wedding, the royal family from England. And just as the wedding procession is approaching, she arrives at the palace with her kids, and she's also dressed up like in her royal best as the queen that she is.
Yeah, like thrice over, 4 times over.
Yeah. So she lets the children out of the carriage and tells them like, go and kiss your father's hand. And so they run to their father. And when he sees these children, he recognizes them as his children and immediately understands like, oh, like it was just Catherine that I was marrying every single time.
Yeah.
That kooky woman. I don't know what it's like. And he like realizes that he's been tricked and he says, so this is the slap that you were going to give me. And he starts like hugging his kids. And I'm like, okay, what? But just as dumbfounded as I am by that comment, the Princess of England was also dumbfounded. And she just like turns around and walks away and be like, what is going on?
How embarrassing.
This guy should be embarrassed. So Catherine explains her action. She explains what happened, how she tricked this guy, explains the mystery of how, there were so many ladies across Italy that looked exactly like her because they were her. And it says that the prince couldn't apologize enough for what he'd done. And like no truer sentence was written in this entire story. There's nothing that guy could do to apologize for what he had done, which was even just throwing her into the pit and leaving her to die. And then cheating on her with her and cheating on her with her with her and cheating on her with her with her with her.
Yeah.
Come on. This is like cheatception. It's cheating all the way down, infidelity all the way down.
Oh my gosh.
But also not, which is kind of funny. But it's, again, that harkens back to the Shakespeare story, which I'm sure we'll get into. And I'm just going to finish the story because I've got like one last thing, because it says he couldn't apologize enough. And then the story ends with something that says they lived happily ever after, which that is annoying. But then this next part, I'm like, maybe this redeems it. Well, here we sit grinding our teeth. And I don't know what they actually mean to say by that, except for the fact that it's like, I am grinding my teeth because I'm mad that they're living happily ever after.
Yeah.
Because like, no.
No.
Like, not that Catherine deserves it and the children deserve it, but this guy does it. But it's like, why is it like, it's similar to the Shakespeare, All's Well That Ends Well. Why is it a happy ending that they're together?
Yeah.
It's not at all.
Yeah, when it's like, wait, but how is this a happy ending?
So I am grinding my teeth.
Yeah.
In consternation. But I like this story a lot just because of like Catherine's, like her wisdom being used like in all of these situations to like get the better of this like really jerky guy. And she went from, she was like a super rich, practically noble lady to start with, but like marrying up into like royalty and then like really just repeatedly getting the upper hand on like the crown prince, getting her own child to then be like the crown prince and becoming like a queen.
Yeah.
And like proving to this guy, like, no, I am totally owned you every single time. Like, I am the queen. You are in my debt forever. And I'm going to slap you when you least expect it. So, and besides the ending, I liked it. Although I guess like thinking through too, it's kind of like she marries him and like lives with him for those 2 years at a time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like she should not, so that was like, whatever, 6 years plus of her life just within the story that's like shouldn't have been spent with such a jerk. But
they do say that you need to continually be wooing and dating your spouse.
He took that to the logical extreme.
Oh man.
But it is interesting. I feel like I feel like it does a lot of the same things as All's Well That Ends Well.
Yeah.
In a simpler, easier to understand way. And obviously like a play is different than just like a quick story because this is a shorter thing than like a whole play is. And I do remember seeing All's Well That Ends Well like performed as a play in like a Shakespeare in the Park thing.
Yeah.
And enjoying it and also being able to like, there's more to it than just like getting that point across. There's like a lot of just fun and funny interactions and things that happen throughout it. Just like there's in this, but it's like Built Del Mar. There's a lot more characters, a lot more complexity, but it is also those things like even watching the play, I was confused a little bit about what was going on. And I feel like in the play too, there's like moments where people are just like, I'm explaining how complex this is and what has happened. Like I'm realizing it, but just so I can tell you like, yes, this is what happened in case you were confused. Cause I totally was.
I felt like that too in this play, that instead of like other ones where you're kind of shown what's happening or it's very clear, or like the characters themselves explain their motivation. In this one, there was a lot of like very, very small, short scenes where one person was explaining to another person what was happening so that you could kind of like follow or connect these like different ideas.
Yeah. And it's not like that's the only time that that's happened in Shakespeare. Like it does happen all the time too. And it's also more complex, I think, for us because, it was written in the language like of the time. Like it was just like people as close to people talking as like movies and stuff are now to people talking. Whereas to us, it sounds like halfway to a different language. So it's like hard for us to understand what they're actually meaning when they're saying things. And then adding like what they seem to have recognized, what Shakespeare seemed to have recognized was a pretty convoluted and confusing plot to begin with, like in another language that we don't fully understand. Yeah. But anyway, both fun. I think, Catherine the Wise is up for a remake of some kind in cinema. On the theater. I don't know.
I feel like in a very similar way, though, like it would have the exact same problem, like at the end. And so the author would have to be, or like the movie screenwriter or whatever would have to be trying to basically make the same point of like, here's what happens. And you don't really like any of these characters ending up together. And me as the screenwriter I feel the same way. And like, that's weird, I think, for an audience too. In the same way that it was weird cause I know that like, the All's Well That Ends Well, it's called a problem play, like not because at the time, it was labeled a problem play, but because like scholars since then have been like, this feels like a weird thing to be getting across to an audience. Like you don't typically want your audience at the end going, oh, and you have the king coming out being like, well, that's the end of the play. Yeah. If it ended well, then I guess the ends justified the means. And it's like, oh, but did they? Ugh. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I'm like, I think it'd be really interesting to see, what you were saying, like a movie remake or a modernization or whatever.
Yeah, like even if it's set in those times, just being made in this time, it's gonna like say a lot about now. Even if it was like supposed to still be like in whatever 1594 or whenever it was written or supposed to be set. But I feel like they would have to do something with the ending because it seems like part of the thing with this, and it's I don't know like the culture at the time and how things were. It's like because this also seems like again you've got like a very like active, proactive, smart, capable like female protagonist in the story, which seems like very much like of our day, which is one of the things that makes me feel like, oh yeah, we could totally remake something. But there's like both the play and this tale make great pains to be like, he's cheating on her, but he's not actually cheating on her because like it's her. So like that's not a problem. It's not a problem that he thought that he was cheating on her because he wasn't. Yeah. And it's like, what is that actually enough? Like, is that as flimsy of an excuse to the people back then as it is to me now? It's like, no, that's kind of like not really the point. You know?
It's like when you find like every now and then you'll hear these like stories of two spouses that were cheating on each other by like getting like on Tinder.
Putting out an ad in the classifieds where they're do you like pina coladas?
Yes, that's not where I was going, but I had forgotten that song existed. That is like a thing.
But yeah, no, like the modern day version of that is like, they both get Tinder profiles and like match with each other.
Yeah, and I've seen stories like that too, where it's like, two spouses, got Tinder accounts and didn't tell the other person, but then they ended up matching with each other and going on like a date or whatever app it was. But to me, I would be like, oh, you're cheating on me, and I thought I was cheating on you. Mm-hmm. Maybe we shouldn't be with each other, instead of like the pina colada song where they're like, oh man, we are meant to be together.
Yeah. In like the most charitable way that I can think of interpreting it, and the difference to these plays and this story is that like in those types of stories, presumably there was like an actual relationship that was founded on something real to begin with, that then like they forgot about and lost, and then like, oh, we both realized that we had like disconnected from each other, and then like we found that we can reconnect. It's like I can see how people think that. But if that actually literally happened to me, I would not be like, oh no, it's totally cool.
Yeah.
But it's like, I can see, but then this is like, this relationship was not founded on anything. I guess maybe you could argue that like in these fake relationships, like they had those 2 years at a time that there was like some sort of like real relationship.
Yeah. Except that he still ended up leaving them to go cheat.
Yeah. And he like left you in a pit to rot.
Yeah.
Like the real you, you know what I mean? Who he thought was the real you. Like they're all the real her, but like, and it's just like, oh no, it's fine. Like my fairy tale fix to this would be, I don't know how to like make it all wrap up and like make sense in the end for it to actually have a happy ending, but like she literally would just actually backhand him across the face at the end, and then be like, and like the king, disinherited him and her, and she became like, and her son became the heir to the king, and like that guy just was a loser and showed his terrible quality. And so everyone knew that he sucked. The end. Yeah.
That like at the wedding with like that like princess like of England, he basically gets like slapped so hard like across the face that he like just explodes into dust. And then like Catherine and like the Princess of England are both like, you know what? Men are the worst. And then they make out and they rule all of Europe together. That's my fairy tale fix.
You went a direction with that. A real direction.
Yep. So I hope everybody enjoyed this episode. I hope that you learned something about Shakespeare. I'm laughing, but joking like aside, I think it's a super interesting lens to look at these stories through the folk tales. I kind of, basically made the same assertions at the end of our Taming of the Shrew, that when you look at these plays and you look at what material Shakespeare's audience would have been familiar with and see how he is reworking it and like adding or subtracting from it to really create something new that's all him for his audience, it is such an enriching experience, because instead of it just being like, oh, okay, I guess that was like a fun little Shakespeare play. I don't understand. Yeah. when it's like, I don't understand why the ending felt weird to me, but I guess maybe I just don't understand Shakespeare. And it's like, no, I'm here to tell you, you did understand Shakespeare. Because what Shakespeare was trying to say was that the happy ending that you wanted? I don't think so. And yeah, I just think it's good to look at these plays through multiple different lenses. And obviously, folklore and fairy tales is going to be the lens that I most enjoy looking at these through.
Thank you for listening to The Fairy Tellers. If you enjoy what we're doing, please leave us a review or share us with your friends. For access to exclusive bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon at patreon.com/thefairytellers. Special thanks to Andy Forey for our music and to Clarice Inch for our artwork. And of course, a big thank you to all our patrons. Without all of you, this show wouldn't be possible.
Good stories pay little attention to cultural or linguistic frontiers. The student of story collections find themselves adrift on an ocean of stories, an ocean which is boundless, deep, and ceaseless in motion. Robert Irwin. I almost said a nothing burger.
A nothing booger. A nothing booger. Burger.
It was a nothing burger.
Booger, burger, burger.
Burgermeister burger.